Heavy is the dead that wears the crown. Here's a look at the McFarlane toys: Spawn, King Spawn, and Demon Minions. A government agent, Al Simmons, was killed by his own men. Resurrected from the depths of hell, he returned to Earth as the warrior Spawn, guarding the forgotten alleys of New York City. As he seeks answers about his past, Spawn grapples with the dark forces that returned him to Earth, battling enemies and discovering unlikely allies. As he learns to harness his extraordinary powers, he begins to grasp the full extent of what brought him back and what he left behind. First thing we'll do before we look at Simmons' wings and things, and he's got plenty of things to go around. First, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did kindly provide the sample of new King Spawn and his several minions, even though you can't see them right now. They're lurking around. I think one of them is right now grabbing a soft drink. The figure, though, is a standard size Spawn, although he does have the wings on the back of the figure's body. Because he's a standard Spawn, he's about still the same inches in height, about 7 of those, or the figure's about 18 centimeters tall. Grabbing one of the various Spawns I have in my collection. This just happens to be the Spawn that got packed along with the Cape Crusader. Same size Spawn, perhaps a slightly different body, but obviously this one also doesn't have a cape. It has wings on the back instead. Another figure I did want to bring in for size comparisons, even though you're not necessarily going to be scaling the two side by side. But here's also what the figure looks like with Cygor. Always a sucker for a cybernetic ape. As for King Spawn's accessories, though, the term "the cup runneth over" would best describe the stuff that comes included with King Spawn. Not only does the figure come with the traditional display stand and trading card, but he also comes with 3 demon minions and a series of firearms. Yes, I'm hoping that you guys were sitting when I was saying that. He comes with not 1, not 2, but 7 different guns that you can display with either this figure or display with other figures that have unfortunately had no guns packed with them. Backtracking just a little bit. I know everybody is right now wanting to look at the guns. Hold on a second. Let's not get gun happy. First, the figure comes included with a display stand. I would be obviously pointing out the obvious is the fact that the figure comes included with the same type of stand as all the other DC Multiverse and other things that McFarlane's team have put out, other than the fact that this one now has branded down below the Spawn font. Off to the corner there is a display stand peg that will come handy, though, when it comes to displaying King Spawn. Stating, I'm sure, the obvious things, the fact that he does have wings on the back of the figure's torso means that he is very back heavy, although he hasn't fallen just yet, now that I've jinxed myself saying that. The figure also as well comes included with a trading card. Depicted on the front, at least, is the head for King Spawn. Notably, though, the horns on the top of King Spawn's head are actually gray instead of red. They decided to mold them in red, but I think they're supposed to be gray instead. I guess they probably did that just to have there's a little bit more pop of color to the figure's face. I would have preferred if they had been gray. But I mean, again, other than that, the fact we are getting a King Spawn, loving the look of him. On the back, though, if you were expecting something new for King Spawn, you'd have to look elsewhere. Unfortunately, the read-up on the back is just a generalized Al Simmons read-up, describing how he left from hell and became Spawn on Earth. I will be, of course, putting this in with the rest of my trading cards, not necessarily the DC Multiverse. These all have a dedicated space in my binder. These all go with the rest of my Spawn cards. Love, once again, that they're using source material. Keep that trend up. Let's go on now to the other things that come included with the figure. First, he also comes included with demon minions. I just love the idea that the figure comes included with demon minions. I was actually also surprised to see that not only are they all different from one another, but they also possess on some level some posability. You can move their arms back and forth. Unfortunately, though, moving the arms around does then give a little bit of stability issues when it comes to figure standing. There's only so many ways that you can actually have these displayed. Bringing the arms up, for example, obviously, then you're not going to have the demon minion being able to move or stand as well. This one's kind of interesting, though, because it's kind of got like, it looks to be something like a cross between like a kaiju from Pacific Rim and maybe something we saw from Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest? One of the cronies, of course, for Davy Jones. Really interesting design, though, for the demon minion. Again, this one does have the long tongue sticking out here. Looks like something that maybe Gene Simmons, I'm sure, would have designed a character like this. Interesting colors, too. And the thing I like also about the demon minions is that the colors are all different from one another. So while this is kind of being more of a charred, kind of grayish black, we have one here that's got a little bit more of a purple color scheme to it. Again, it's got some arm articulation, so you can move them back and forth. But again, like, depending on how you move those arms will dictate just how stable this guy stands. This one also doesn't have any leg articulation. I thought for a second that this guy could move down below, but it's only just a case it seems to be able to move his arms. I love the way they've got the rows of teeth here on the top and on the bottom. Both this one and the one that just happens to be my favorite of the three look like something you'd expect to see from a new Ghostbusters movie. Speaking of which, we got a new Ghostbusters movie coming out. I can't wait for that. But this one is one by far my favorite. It does look a little bit like a ghost, a ghoul, something that the Ghostbusters would be busting. Multiple eyes there in the front, big long teeth on the bombs and on the top. Again, there is articulation. The articulation with this one, the neat thing is that he has tiny little arms also as well, but the arms are attached permanently to the rest of the larger forearms, so you can only really move both of them at the same time. By far my favorite, though, is this one here, and just the idea that we actually get ourselves tiny little minions. Such a nice touch on McFarlane's part. Okay, I know what you guys want to look at. Let's check out the guns. Now, he has 7 different guns. Surprised that he actually got as many as he did. Surprised, in fact, that he actually got guns, in fact, at all. I don't know what the mandate would be when it comes. I know certainly what the mandate would be for the DC Multiverse stuff, but I wonder if maybe it doesn't apply as much for McFarlane's Spawn brand, because obviously Spawn is still doing well when it comes to weapons. He has several weapons to wield. The ones that look a little bit more kind of cartoon or comic book look to them is these big bulky guns. They're all kind of cast in sort of more of a medium gray plastic. Yes, they could have probably afforded a little bit of wash. I'm not going to knock the fact that we actually do finally get ourselves some guns with these figures, so I can actually use these around with other figures. I might even just decide to use these with some DC Multiverse figures. Now, the handles, I will say that the handles are the medium size, but there's almost like an oversized bulkiness to all these guns. Now, these are my favorite of the batch that we get, but then we also get kind of ones a little bit more rooted to earth. So like this one here, of course, all the standard size guns. I'm not going to probably start to rhyme off the actual models of these guns. We got like a shotgun. We got like I don't know if that's an M16. I think this is an actual M16, but yeah, again, like they're all molded here just in gray plastic. We've got ourselves kind of like one of those, you know, the ones that shoot like the grenades out there. Arnold would have had this in T2. And then we also got ourselves a traditional Tommy gun, which is kind of cool as well. They're all really neat, but I just wish that they could have had a little bit of wash to them, other than just relying on just the gray plastic alone. Some of them, of course, get the benefit of having some additional brown to them, like, for example, the shotgun, like, for example, the Tommy gun, but all the rest of them really are just kind of relegated to the gray plastic alone. Now, because the figure does have gripping hands on both forearms, means as well that you can actually have the figure displayed with wielding guns. Obviously, he only has 2 arms to work with, so obviously you're not going to be able to have the figure displayed with multiple guns. And the guns hold okay in his hand. There's sort of a bit of an oversized look to them. They don't kind of look the most realistic, but at least the fact we actually finally get ourselves guns with these figures, I'm just happy for that. Again, we can kind of go with these as well. I'm going to take this one and put this in his hand. Again, this is one of my favorites that the figure comes included with. And I might just, again, loan these weapons around for other figures on my shelf. Love the idea that he comes included with some firearms, finally. And move those to the side as well. Getting, though, now a closer look at King Spawn. Other than the one thing I did mention earlier, I kind of wish, though, the horns were not maybe the coloring of the red. This Spawn sort of does look a little bit like Darth Maul. Kind of a little bit like Darth Maul with the spikes sticking out the top of his head. He has more of a classic look to Spawn, other than just the fact that his face now has a visible mouth. The mouth doesn't open or close or anything like that, but it's got some really nice detailing done to the tops and the bottoms of the teeth. You got some nice glowing green eyes there as well. All the things you'd expect to see with Spawn. The colors, though, of his suit aren't the darkest, though. They kind of went to more of a medium to dark gray rather than a black. If you were to say compare him to, well, let's bring in the other Spawn that we've already had a look at. The Spawn that got packed along with Batman definitely goes the more darker approach of black. I kind of wish that maybe the colors with the plastic were a little bit darker than what we're actually getting here. The gray works really well, but if they had just turned it down one notch and made it just a little bit darker than what it is, I think colors like the figure's face, for example, would stand out a lot more than what it is. These horns, by the way, on the top of his head are made of fairly soft plastic, so if you were worrying, for example, that these could potentially break, stop your worrying. They're not going to break at all. Of course, now I say that, somebody's going to be breaking their figure. Of course, he has traditionally looking Spawn suit to him, the nice little belt buckle of the skull there on the front. This is all, by the way, using soft silver plastic. It's attaching from the front, and if you follow it all the way to the back, there's also another, although smaller, skull belt buckle on the back of the figure's body. The texturing on this guy looks really good. Again, you've got the more traditional colors of Spawn with the lighter white. You've got some additional red also added in there as well. And of course, all the things you'd expect Spawn to have, like the little rings of spikes that he has on his bicep, little gauntlets that he has there as well, all have been really nicely painted. They actually did take the time to go in there and paint the spikes. Sometimes we have gotten Spawn figures before where we have gauntlets like this, and unfortunately none of the things like spikes are painted. This one actually does get the afforded paint job done to them. And actually looking at this, it kind of looks like the head of a triceratops or a dragon. Just something I did notice. Got a couple of belt pockets there on the side. Of course, every 90s character has to have some belt pockets on their thighs or on their biceps. Spawn just happens to have it here on his thighs. These are softer plastic again. And again, he's got the big clunky boot down below as well. So nothing really does change from Spawn other than the fact that this one does have, of course, the crown of horns, the crown of horns, and also, again, the visible mouth. The other thing also, this whole time of talking about this, obviously the very obvious thing is the fact that the figure also has the wings on the back of the figure's body. I can't tell if these are the same wings that we got with, like, for example, the anti-Spawn. This also may have been also the same ones that we got also with the Batman Who Laughs ones with wings. But I think, if anything, it looks more like the wings that we got with the anti-Spawn. The wings are sculpted nicely. I mean, there's no sense in that you can actually move these around. There is a posability point actually on the back of his torso. We can move the wings up and down this way. You can also hinge them back too. But of course, the more you hinge them back, the more back heaviness you're going to be essentially giving the figure. And the figure's going to have a harder time to stand. You can lean him a little bit further forward, but the wings are going to continue to pull this guy back. So definitely make use of a display stand. It's packed with him anyways. You might as well use it. Now for the figure's articulation, the head sculpt is once again to be on a ball joint, so it does rotate the head all the way around. The head looks up about that far and looks down. Quite a bit down actually, and you can also hinge it back and forth as well. Shoulders easily come out 90 degrees, even further past 90 degrees. I did notice though on this arm of mine at least, that's a little on the looser side. Still, it rotates all the way around. The figure has a bicep swivel, double hinge on the elbow, and the hand, even though this one's a little harder to get because underneath the gauntlet does still allow to rotation. One thing I did also want to mention though, while we were talking about the fact that nothing got missed here on the top of the gauntlet, sadly something did get missed. When you look at the actual spikes that he has on the tops of his hands, no paint was actually afforded to that area. The figure has an upper torso ball joint, a lower torso ball joint. Legs do split out on ratcheted joints, so you can take those legs and move them forward, move them back, a swivel at the top of the thigh, double hinge on the knee, and once again, you got that ankle articulation. Now, this foot, speaking of things that are loose, this foot is a little on the looser side. It does rock back and forth just a little bit, and the figure, again, has toe articulation. If you want to stick to that side or you want to switch to this side, the figure also has on this side also toe articulation there as well, even though he has the clunkier boot. It's definitely a figure that does rely on the display stand. So if you didn't have a display stand, luckily one got packed along with them. You can always pillage the ones that we get from other McFarlane releases. That's the benefit really of McFarlane toys, is the fact that they include display stands, even if you don't necessarily need them. You never know though when you may need them, as a figure like, King Spawn's going to come out like this and be a very back heavy figure. As you can see, like the display stand does really come in handy to keep this guy from falling over. But even then, you're going to probably have to have this guy with the wings maybe a little bit further forward, as it sort of does distribute the weight a little bit better. At the end of the day, though, really nice figure. I do like the inclusion as well of the guns. Let's just get this guy on his display stand. I do like the inclusion of the guns. The fact that we get not one, not two, but 7 of these things means that you can also share these around with other figures. So you don't have to necessarily have them always displayed with Spawn figures. If you wanted to, you can have them also as well displayed with the DC Multiverse figures, which up to this point, most of the figures, if not all the figures, have been sorely lacking in any ammunition. At least we now have the benefit of some additional firearms that don't get packed with them, but certainly could be lent over when we get one, like with all the ones that we get here with King Spawn. Banking on not just the one display stand that the figure came included with, I ended up just pillaging one I had off to the side here on the studio table just to give him a little bit of extra stability. Speaking of stability, what you can also do as well with the figure, I tend to do with a lot of figures that have wings, is that if you lean him back like this, not only can you give him a really interesting looking pose, but he can also rest some of the weight on the tip of the wing. At least on one of the wing, and that's more than enough to keep this guy from falling over. Because I really like the pose that I've got him in, and just probably after this review, I'm going to literally carry it over, carbon copy the way he looks right now, and put him immediately on the shelf. I certainly will be as well displaying this guy with 1 or 2 of the various 7 guns that the figure comes included with. Still can't believe the fact that we actually do get ourselves a McFarlane release that actually does have guns, even though, again, like the DC Multiverse stuff is really missing the fact that they don't have guns, especially for characters that are supposed to have them. At least you can borrow off the ones that we get here with King Spawn and just lend them off to another figure instead. Not only does he get 7 guns, but then he also gets 3 demon minions, a nice included touch. Even though the minions don't have a lot of posability, I was really pleasantly surprised to see that not 1, not 2, but all 3 of them actually have some mobility in their shoulders. Unfortunately, with some of them, though, like my favorite, has to rest on front of his hands, so even though he has the movement there on the tops of his shoulders, you really can't move him anyways because the figure's just going to take a topple over anyways. What do you guys, though, think of King Spawn? Overall, a nice-looking figure. He's painted where it counts. I mean, obviously, there's still an opportunity where they could have gone in there and painted the spikes on the ends of their arms, on the ends of his hands. The wings are nicely painted. I'm sure they probably have used these over from the Anti-Spawn or the Redeemer. But again, I think for what he is, and considering he has as many things as he does, and considering the fact that the figure has 7 different weapons to wield, A nice release from the folks over at McFarlane Toys. What do you guys think, though, of King Spawn? Have you guys had the chance to pick up this one for yourself? If you have, let me know what you guys think of him down below in the comments section. Big thank you once again to the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did provide this sample of the brand new Spawn, King Spawn, and his 3 demon minions. Certainly, if you guys did enjoy this video, I want to throw it a like. If you guys are loving the content you guys are seeing and you're on board to certainly see more, we may be wrapping up things right now for a Spawn. It's not to say that we won't be looking at some more McFarlane reviews in the pipeline. In fact, I keep saying this, I keep looking over, and I got a stack of stuff that we're going to still be looking at, so we're not wrapping up things at all anytime soon for stuff that we're getting from McFarlane's team. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.